Hello, I'm Brian Proball. I'm the production director here at Lyric Arts, and I'm the scenic designer for Grease. I get a chance to design maybe 3 or 4 shows a year here at Lyric, and I'm very excited to be working on this musical this summer. One of the things here at Lyric that we really wanted to focus on was this gritty sense of Grease. Not the bubbly light version, but the more realistic, gritty version of Grease. And with that, I wanted to emphasize the actual location that Grease takes place, which is Chicago. I'm actually from Chicago, and so it was just a great love for me to kind of emphasize some of that. But with the design, really what we're looking for is the textures of an urban setting that kind of makes this Grease more unique than some of the other versions maybe you've seen in the past. That Chicago emphasis, one of the things I really wanted to emphasize was some of the unique architecture to that city. We're really kind of focusing on the L tracks, or the elevated tracks. Chicago is one of the great industrial centers of the Midwest, and one of the big things that's really cool about it is that we're kind of focusing where the city architecture kind of meets the neighborhoods. It's this very interesting place in American urban landscape where we can have like a raised elevated track going through the backyards of somebody's house or whatnot where the trash cans are kept. So there's probably about maybe 2 or 3 miles of this track through Chicago where this is true. Otherwise, it's kind of that downtown section where the train's really elevated and up, and this is kind of those small neighborhoods right on the edges of that. One of the things we're really doing is doing very specific locations for this, and we have picked an actual site in Chicago. So we are on the blue line of the elevated tracks. We're at the Division Street exit, and we're in Bucktown. Bucktown's kind of an interesting little neighborhood. It's on the north side, and it's a very Polish-based neighborhood. Very ethnic centered and whatnot, and it's also kind of a little bit of the poorer side of town, which really kind of goes with the story of Grease itself. These are kind of our ruffians and leftovers and kids that are just out causing a little bit of trouble and mischief as they loiter around. So, some of the tiny small things that really excite me as a scene designer, one of the things is the street signs. They're actually a different color at this time period, so they're kind of this yellow orangey color. It's before we kind of had that federal mandate for green, and so it's a kind of a unique part in that thing. So there's just some small details like that. Also, signs were a huge part of the landscape of Chicago. It's really where we got to that commercialism of the 50s. And so there's just lots of neon and signs, and in this part of town, they're actually, all of our signs are sort of advertising sort of the darker side of the city. So we've got hotels that are kind of seedy hotels, and Pete's Bungalow Lounge, and bowling alleys, and of course we have that something that's very unique to Chicago as well, as the sense of like the storefront church. It's kind of where it got started. So that kind of Jesus Saves in a real small storefront where you're making that congregation work with 20 people. So it's kind of that interesting kind of signage that kind of goes with this as well. And then of course the very heavy industrial architecture of the elevated tracks. So the L was built just after the turn of the century is when it was finished, and so it's this very steel and riveted and big massive structure of industrialism. So it's just kind of really unique. One of the great things about working in our space is that it is so dynamic and so kinetic, but that's also some of the challenges that really present itself. One of the big things is we actually have a full-on Grease car. It's kind of miniaturized little Chevy, 57 Chevy, and we use it for Grease Lightning, but it actually drives and moves, and we have to get it on the stage. So one of the big parts of this design is really allowing the access for all the small scenic units to set the locations. And then also creating something dynamic. So we kind of worked a little bit on a diagonal a little bit to create really some dynamic lines. We also did a little bit of forced perspective to make you feel like it's bigger and larger than it really is. And then also this sense of all these signs and the neon and whatnot, and how to hang them all and get them all lit and wired and all that. We're hoping for the flashing neon and the bulbs that blink and all that. And so those are some of the big challenges we're dealing with. And then the other part of that challenge we have in such a small space is we have this scene for Raining on Prom Night at the same time that we're having the high school hop. And what I'll say is why don't you come down to Lyric Arts, take a look at the show, and see how we solved it, because I think we did it in a really creative way. So I'm very excited for you guys to get a chance to see Grease, and come get a little slice of Chicago. So
when I was 3, I pushed a fly. While chopping wood, I moved my legs, and I saw it dance while I gathered